Hey guys, it's me again, Mark Snakori, and now I'm going to be talking about my entire college experience at Northern Essex Community College and Merrimack College, including every grade I got and the teachers I had that taught certain subjects that I took. So to start off, we have fall of 2000. I took basic reading. I actually tested out of it because I did great on the essay part of the exam when I applied. So they wanted me to test out of that and go to college reading and enter the comp. But I said, no, I don't want to do that because I knew how bad Central was with me and the grades I got there. So I said, I want to start there, even if it's a low level, get a great grade, because Merrimack wanted all C pluses or higher. So I took basic reading with Professor Marcia Dalton. It was an amazing class, and I received an A. Fun fact, it's the only straight A I received in all of my college experience. And that's bad, isn't it? Okay. Then I took drawing with Professor Eleanor West, a very sweet lady, and I received a B. Then I took, I believe it was Basic Algebra 2, or it could have been just Basic Algebra, with, what's his name? Professor Michael Kramer. He was a nice guy. Very tough class because math was always my toughest subject. I had like a borderline C plus before I took my final, and I kept asking him, I really want to get at least a B minus. I know I have to get a C plus or better for Merrimack to accept me, but I always try my best and I really want that B minus. And my grade was, I believe it was a B in the end, or B minus, one of the other. It was in the B. It was in the B scale. And then I took computers for beginners with Professor D'Alessandro, I think it was. No, Dunbar. Professor Dunbar. And she always smoked. I don't know how old she'd be now. She was probably in her 50s then. Very nice lady, but I didn't know how to copy. I didn't know how to paste. People think I'm a computer genius, but I'm not. I have hackers who are better than me. I didn't know anything about copying and pasting, and it was hard. Entry-level class, too. And half of us were getting, like, Fs. But then, during the final, everything made sense. I'm like, oh, this is how you copy and paste. I'm like, I just pushed a button. I'm like, oh, that's how you copy. That's how you paste. So I ended up with a B minus in the end. But out of all four of those classes, my first semester at Northern Essex, only drawing was able to transfer to Merrimack. And drawing, I received a B. So those other three classes, even if I got in, wouldn't count. And then it was spring semester of 2001. Spring semester of 2001, I took college writing with Professor Alfred Fickey. I believe it's Alfred. Mr. Fickey. And it was a great class. He was a nice guy. He was getting up in years. He was probably in his late 60s, getting close to 70. And I ended up with an A minus in this class. Then I took college algebra. I took college algebra with Professor Michael Brown. Awful class at first. I was getting a D as usual. And that's what made me quit McDonald's. I'm like, I have to go to school full time. And I went to see him for extra help. And I ended up with a B. And then I took college reading with Professor Eleanor LaRoe. And I'd always make jokes. I'm like, I can't get above a B plus in my tests. And one time she's like, Mark, quit it, or you're going to be in trouble. I'm like, oh my God, I'm sorry. I ended up with a B in that class. It was a good class, great teacher. Then I took Intro to Biology with Professor Holden. And I was thinking, please don't be like Jowett. Please don't be like Jowett in Central. And Professor Holden was a good guy. But sadly, when I took my tests, I was ending up with C pluses and high C's. And I told him I have to get at least a C plus or higher to get into Merrimack. And in the end, I ended up with a B. And so second semester, I took college writing. I took Intro to Biology. I took college algebra. And I took, what else? Oh, the reading class, college reading. And out of all of those, the college writing class, the college algebra class, and the biology class all would transfer if I got into Merrimack. So, there you have it with Northern Essex Community College. And Northern Essex Community College, I received all B minuses and above. Merrimack College accepted me. Dumb me from Central. Fall of 2001, I took Major British Authors with Professor Robert Cohen. Very funny guy. Great professor. He was almost in the 70s back then. And I received a B minus. Then I took Parables of the World with Professor William Wyans. Great professor. I had a B minus, but he gave extra credit, and I did the extra credit, and I ended up with a B. Then I took Sociology with Professor Sean Quinn. And I was getting like a D at first. And I asked him, can we get extra credit? There's no extra credit. Oh my God. Somehow I ended up with a B minus in the end in that class. And then I took Perspectives on Human Nature, which was my Intro to Philosophy class, with Professor Herbert Meyer. He was from Germany. Great professor. I had a B plus at first, but then the subject area just didn't interest me, and I ended up with a C in the end. Then winter of 2002, I took Politics and Literature, again with Professor Robert Cohen, and I ended up with a B, and he berated me, Mark, I thought you were going to get an A. I'm like, hey, at least I did better than last semester. Then I took Geology with Professor Westerling. And I was scared. I'm like, oh my God, please don't be like Jowett. Please don't be like Jowett. Please don't be like Benedetto. Don't be like Benedetto. And his tests were hard. I ended up with like C's on his tests. And then he gave a semester project. And I did my ocean wave project I did at the Failing Academic Olympics in 2000. And I ended up with a B in the end. Then I took Psychology with Professor Dorney. And I started off really low in that class. I was like a D-level student. Somehow, I ended up with a B. Then I took Intro to Religion with Professor Bishop. Great teacher. I ended up with an A minus. And then I took Ancient Philosophy, again with Professor William Wyans. It was my lowest grade in college. It was a C minus. Ooh, it was a C minus. He told me, you didn't do too great in the final. It was take-home written essay, too. It was what it was. Then, summer of 2002, I took Intro to New Testament with Professor Bishop, and I ended up with an A minus. And then fall of 2002, I took Intro to Composition Studies with Professor Deborah Burns, ended up with a C plus. I took Foundations of Education with Professor Roselli, and I ended up with a B. I took American Indian Renaissance with Professor Kevin Plunkett, and I ended up with a C plus. And I took Shakespearean Drama with Professor Marie Plass, ended up with a B. And then I took Intro to Middle Schools with Professor Barry Hopping, and I ended up with a B plus. Then winter of 2003, which was a big letdown semester for me, I took 20th Century Drama and Performance by Women with Professor Plass again. I ended up with a B minus. I took Intro to Literary Studies with Professor Mary Kay Mahoney. I ended up with a B minus. I took Modern British with Professor Kerry Johnson. I ended up with a C plus. I took educational psychology with Professor Deborah Margolis, and I ended up with a B. And I took urban sociology with Professor Smythe, not Smith, Smythe, and I ended up with a C. That was my hardest semester ever there. Then, in summer of 2003, I took Intermediate Spanish 1 and 2 with Professor Robert Galuli. And Spanish 1, I had an A-, and Spanish 2, I had a B+. Then in fall of 2003, I took 18th Century Novel with Professor Stephen Sherwotsky, who was also my counselor, and I ended up with a C+. And I took Script Writing with Professor Kathleen Sills, ended up with an A-. I took General Methods for Middle School Teachers with Professor Loretta D'Alessandro, and I ended up with a B+. And then I took Adolescent Psychology, again with Professor Deborah Margolis, and I ended up with an A-. And that semester, I made the Dean's List. Then winter of 2004, I took Sex, Race, and Empire with Professor Schwartzky again, ended up with a B-. I took Victorian Literature with Mary Kay Mahoney, ended up with a B. Theater 1, I took with Professor Sills, and I ended up with an A-. And then I took History of Theater 2 with Professor Sills, and I ended up with an A-. Then in summer of 2004, I took Short Story with Professor Al DiCiccio, and I ended up with an A-. And I took Creative Nonfiction Workshop with Professor Jay Atkinson, and I ended up with a B. Fall of 2004, I took Senior Seminar in English with Professor Kerry Johnson, and I ended up with a C. And I took Detective Fiction with Mary Kay Mahoney, and I ended up with a B. And then for my final semester in spring of 2005, I took Creative Writing with Professor Mary Kay Mahoney, which was a class I really wanted to take for like several years there, and I ended up with a B. And then I took Theater 2 with Professor Sills, and I ended up with an A-. And there you have it. There are all my grades in college. And you can call me dumb, you can call me stupid, because I got 1 C-, 4 C's, and 4 C+ as my lowest grades. Everything else was a B- and above. When I graduated from Merrimack College, I had a low 3.0 average all around, which was a B average. Compared to Central, where I had low 2.0, 2.1 every quarter. And you can take that to the bank.